Our next session will tackle the evolving threats, vulnerabilities, and countermeasures. It will be moderated by Ms. Bedriya Bedri from KPMG. Joining the stage are Ms. Magdalena Melkarts from Citibank, Mr. John Jovanovski from Visa, Mr. Jomax Wakim from the AUB-MC in Lebanon, and Mr. Jean-Michel Kaukabani from Biblos Bank.
Let's get it high, get it right, dim the lights, only got to sunrise, start living for tonight. My heart is racing 100 miles an hour. Let's just embrace and tune the music louder. Let's get it high, get it right, dim the lights, only got to sunrise, start living for tonight. Start living for tonight.
But what is the power behind the throne? Why?
Tens of thousands of computers that have suffered from a ransomware
Another
attack.
global ransomware attack.
Security company reported that it discovered one of the biggest bank robberies ever. No guns involved. Hackers did it, breaking into banks in 30 countries and making it off with a total of as much as $1 billion.
Bring the rain.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. So I guess that was a little bit of cheating because I saved my presentation. So I'm here to moderate the panel. But just a couple of points I wanted to bring out from that video. As I was putting it together, I was struggling to make the right impact. So the key messages I wanted to bring out is cybercrime is big business. As I was doing the research in putting it together, I was personally surprised that it's a £450 billion a year cybercrime business. Now, that's a really big number. We've heard lots of stats today, but to put it into perspective, it's right up there with narcotics of 1% of global GDP, just shy of 1%. The same with counterfeiting, again, 1% of global GDP, and cybercrime's up there. I think enough said. The other point is, it's not just about cybercrime. This affects everything we do in life. We've heard through so many presentations today that it's a connected world. I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years, and the one observation I'll bring from that experience, in 20 years, nothing has changed. We're still talking about the same basic security concepts, but what we struggle to do is do them correctly and consistently right all the time. On the other hand, as we've heard through so many of the presentations today, the cyber threat and landscape has changed massively. So we're in this transition state between the tension of the two. So we have a number of fantastic panelists here who will bring their own different experience. They bring different lenses and different perspective, from an international basis, from a local basis, from the financial sector, from healthcare. So I'll hand over to the first presentation from Magda. They've all promised me they'll keep it to 7 minutes because the idea is we'll have a panel and have lots of questions and discussions. Over to you, Magda.
Thank you, Bai. I hope that you can hear me quite well. So I decided not to do a presentation today. So this is the first good news, probably. The second, and I know that you've probably seen a lot of presentation. I wanted to start a dialogue, and a dialogue with each one of you. I represent here a corporate sector of Citibank. I have been in the banking industry for over 20 years, and I have seen the evolution of the banking industry. And one good thing that I can definitely share with you, even though so far you're probably super scared seeing all the previous presentations and what's happening in the cybercrime space. So the good news is that it's actually kind of the whole digital space is definitely safer than cash. So the transition that has happened from cash into the electronic and digital space is a good movement, so we need to stick to that. But it is quite clear that those new threats started emerging, and we just need to keep on top of, as our previous panelists kind of have mentioned. So let's take a closer look what's happening in this digitization space. Time in, time out, I hear and I speak about kind of what Citi is doing and what the responsibility of my team is around the digital space. We run connectivity systems for Citibank corporate and financial institution customers to connect with the bank, to initiate different types of transactions, whether payments or trade transactions. And we've seen that evolution of transaction volumes from proprietary bank systems, and currently our Citi Direct core banking platform that runs on the desktop, it runs on online in a mobile and tablet version. We process around 200 billion transactions a year through that platform. But that platform already was taken over by host-to-host connectivity and a full integration itself. And not only the volumes transmitted via that channel are greater, but also the value is much greater, over $9 trillion annually in value of processed transactions through the host-to-host connectivity. Then in February this year, we released our first set of APIs, Citi Connect APIs. Right now, over 10 of those API calls available, and over 2 million already APIs calls initiated to date. And then finally, in May this year, we have released our Citi Connect for blockchain, the first blockchain platform that Citi released, and it has been done in partnership with NASDAQ. So in this whole evolution, one thing remains center to what we do, that we need to be more aware of the cyber threats that are coming. And I wanted to share with you a little bit of what Citibank is doing. So first and foremost, we have our Citi Cyber Fusion Center that is working around the clock and around the world. We have 3 locations that follow the sun, so that we are active non-stop: Singapore, Budapest, and New Jersey in the United States, where we work within Citi internally. We consolidate a number of departments that work and bring different perspective of cyber and different threats, frauds. So we have intelligence units. We have my team joining this Fusion Center, which is the product development and the customer impact. Then we have fraud departments joining. We have vulnerability assessment, so technology teams. We have incident management teams that are joining and that are part of it. And that Cyber Fusion Center is really kind of something that we open up to our customers. So Citi customers can visit one of those centers and really learn the best practices from what we do at Citi to protect ourselves. But the major thing that what it does, it helps us protect, so prevent the cybercrime, detect anything that might be potentially happening anywhere in the world, and then finally, what it does. I'm sorry, I'm just. And finally, what it does is it actually allows us to respond quickly and link up quickly with the law enforcement agencies around the world on anything that potentially might be happening at any point in time anywhere in the world. The second important aspect that what we do for our clients, because they are the ones that are probably much more vulnerable than us, is share the best practices. So we've developed for Citi customers a toolkit which is a set of videos, a set of materials readily available, including posters, trainings that you can do internally in your companies, to make sure that your employees, your staff, is very much aware of what is coming, what are the key threats. We share a lot of intelligence on how to prevent the key attack methods and how to respond to those key attack methods, whether it's beneficiary bank account change, whether it's online computer takeover, whether it is CEO impersonation, which are also popular types of attacks, or actually what we have seen recently with WannaCry or Petya, the malware destruction attacks that are happening. So one message from me to all of you is do come to Citi, work with Citi and collaborate on how to prevent so that all of us are actually safer. Because we can only be as strong as the weakest link in the process. And because of that, my second point that I want you to take from this probably conference and this panel is going to be collaboration and partnership being critical in combating the cybercrime. We can only do it together. In that respect, I think that I'll bring probably 4 points that are important for each one of us as we are here and as we sit in the audience, we sit in the panel itself. First of all, really work with your technology partners and actually kind of the partner technology partners outside. Why? Because the new technologies will make you stronger, will make each one of us stronger. Whether it is voice or video recognition that you use in some of your processes, like we do, whether it is deployment of biometrics, or blockchain platforms that we put in use because these are kind of proven so far, more secure than any other. Whether it's the use of behavioral models in how customers behave. What we're doing in actually monitoring our systems, how customers work in our system is how quickly a user clicks the mouse. What are the screens that the user switches off regularly? So if we detect a different pattern in that, we can quickly notify the customer that something is looking suspicious. The second aspect is really collaborate with your suppliers, your vendors, your banks, in order to make sure that everybody is aware of what is happening, and when in the case of detecting something suspicious, really make sure that you know, that you let everybody know. Call the bank. Say that there is a fraud that is happening on my account immediately, because the banks have ability to actually stop those transactions and refund you the money if you report it immediately. If you report it 48 hours after it happens, probably the probability of us returning you the money drops to 50%. If you report it later probably than 72 hours, it drops to 0. So be sure that you act quickly, and for that, link up with your suppliers, your vendors, your banks all the time. The third aspect of the collaboration is really banks collaborating together. And I'm a great supporter of actually sharing best practices within the banks, sharing best practices with our customers as well. And a final point that I wanted to make is really open and transparent dialogue with regulators. And I wanted to, and I know that we have a representative of EU delegation, and I wanted to probably maybe link to one of the recent EU regulations, and it was a 4th AML directive. So it is very true that AML is very important to the bank and the entire system. And we do follow the process. And what 4th AML EU directive does for the European Union countries is very simple. It opens up a possibility for a risk-based approach when it comes to anti-money laundering verification. And therefore, the banks can actually deploy simpler methodologies, simpler, more standardized processes around those who are low AML risk customers, while actually focusing our resources, our strength, on those who are high AML risk. And this is the way where by prioritization and working with the regulators and the continuous dialogue, we can really focus on what is important and where the biggest risk is. So with that, I'll probably pass on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Great pleasure being here today. There was a lot of discussion, okay, what we should expect in the future about the threats, about the, about the danger, about the data exposure, etc. But representing Visa and being here in the great company of my dear colleagues and the partners from the banks in Lebanon, actually for us in risk management, I mean, future is already here. It's now. Why? Because in every product or service that is deployed, security is embedded into the core of the product. This is one. And second, because we have a clear path about how we should deal in very near future in order to secure the payments. Traditionally, payment ecosystem was made by 4 parties: cardholder, bank that is issuing card, merchant that is accepting cards, and the acquiring bank that actually is dealing with the merchant. In the middle is VisaNet, that is transiting the transactions, etc. But in the modern world, in 21st century, that ecosystem, it's a bit more complex. We have mobile providers, we have vendors, we have card manufacturers, we have solution providers, we have any type of institutions that are helping and actually the developing business. How to secure that ecosystem? 2016 was the first year where actually the card not present transactions have overreached more than 50% of the total consumer spending. Card not present transactions, 2016. That means in the all coming years, we would expect more and more transactions where we do not have a physical presence of the card and the card holder. How to secure that environment? We see in Visa, together with our partners, we see actually our strategy, it's with four pillars, working with the data that we have available. First of all, it's to secure the data or protect the data. We are working on constant and full implementation of PCI. It's a payment card industry data security standard, and all other domestic or international standards that are helping in order to protect the data. Second is devaluating the data. Wherever we have in the system sensitive data, we are working to devaluate. How devaluate? Chip card. It's one example how sensitive data is devaluated. Also, next one, it's a tokenization. We already have in Lebanon financial institutions that have implemented token. Do you know, practically token is actually the sensitive card number. It's replaced with a value that actually it's replacing the card number through the transaction. That is the token. The number 3, I would say, strategy regarding the data, it's harnessing the data. How we can use information that we have available in order to predict the data hack, in order to predict the fraud attack, etc. But also very important, it's how we can disrupt the criminal networks and to work with the law enforcement services, investigators, etc., in order to stop and to prevent further exposure. The number 4 is actually, there is one very important point that I think the only one presenter mentioned today. It's empowering the consumers. Nobody knows better if any transaction is suspicious or fraud, etc., than the consumer, than the cardholder itself. That means we need to, and we are already in the process of finding the way how to engage cardholders in the transaction through the spend control, to the mobile locations, etc. Now, if we will move to the next slide, how practically we are doing that. On physical environment, we have different types of pays with the devices, with the tokens, etc. In the card not present space, we have a card on file, we have a wallet, we have a Visa checkout, etc. That means where the sensitive data is transmitted actually into the data that might not, even if someone will get into hold of that, will not be able to misuse it. We're calling this, like a future of the digitalization of the card not present payments. Now, if we will move about, I will just present two, I would say, two main streams, I would say, two clear strategies about how we are in the payment ecosystem, how we are securing the data. Traditionally, when we are paying with a card, it's a process of about what we have in our hands and what we know. We have card, and we know password, we know PIN, etc., etc. But future that is already now, as I said, it's more than that. It's about the keyboard. It's about the IP address. It's about the geolocation, etc. How we can use and how we are using that data actually to prevent fraud, to prevent data compromise cases, to enhance our card holders, to have a seamless transactions, to have an easy way of transacting their purchases, etc. We need to build a highway for that. And highway is already there. Traditionally, when we started to pay over the internet, we had a password that was called verified by Visa, and actually it's a static or dynamic password that you will receive, and you will enter that in order in order purchase to be completed. But the new generation is actually that in that highway will go a flow of more than 150 data elements that issuing institutions will be able to use to make a decision on behalf of the cardholder without passwords. All these elements that are in the slide there behind are already embedded in that highway. This will be the mandate since 2019. Already we have institutions that are certified for this. That means, colleagues, they are, how to say that, we are in the 21st century, but we need to go back to the basics. Updating the softwares, security controls, engagement, constant education, etc., etc. And what is also very important is to collaborate. We need to find a way how to use knowledge that we have between ourselves. What Visa is doing is we have a Visa developer platform, and actually where all the financial institutions and external parties may access and to develop APIs, etc., and to use the tools that we have on disposal in order to develop new products or new services. I will finish with my 7 minutes. I hope I'm okay. We need to balance between the security and convenience. That fine line of effectiveness needs to be achieved. Second, we need to work on devaluating the data. Please ask yourself, do you access any sensitive data? Do you really need to have that access? Work internally within your institution in order to assess what are the needs and what are the priorities, etc. Because if you don't have a data, then you are not under the risk. Number three, it's obviously, we are working very hard in breach disruption, in incident response, etc., similar to data centers like Citi has, etc. We also have some, similar in a couple of locations in the world, etc. That is already in process. But today, almost every presenter mentioned that there is a need of constant exchange of information, either to security alerts or to the email notifications or to phone calls, etc. Please do not hesitate to share that information between yourselves, because as much more we share, that much more we will receive from other parties. And with that, I will just finish here, and I will just continue to the next presenter. Thank you.
One of my old bosses used to say the best way to secure information is actually to make it public. So it's perfectly devaluating the data to the extreme. I'm very honored to be here. I'm actually from a completely different industry. I come from the healthcare industry, and everybody's here is mostly from the finance and banking industries. Nevertheless, we share a lot of the common threads, and I wanted to share a small perspective on, where we stand in healthcare. So essentially, digital transformation has been going on for decades. In the financial industries, the banking industry, airline industry have been on board for a long time. Even though healthcare has been on board the digital transformation, what we call now clinical transformation, we're latecomers to the game. And we've got a lot to learn from others, and we're still, at the same time, we're sort of leapfrogging into the future, adopting some of the technologies that were developed for other industries. So the ultimate transformation for healthcare is moving from that paper record, which could only be accessed in one place at one time by one person, to a digital record which is accessed from anywhere, anytime, by anybody. And so in order to do that, again, in healthcare, in the US, they've tried to push the limits and created something called the High Tech Act in 2009, which forced all healthcare institutions to adopt healthcare records and go electronic. And if they didn't do it so, they wouldn't get paid. They adopted something called meaningful use. So if you only send information electronically to the financial sector, which is going to pay for the bill, then you would basically get paid. Otherwise, you would not. So they pushed everybody on this electronic sort of train. And so you can see from the graph, sorry for the resolution, but from 2009 onwards, there was a peak in the adoption of electronic health records and health information systems in the healthcare industry, okay? And that has come with its own set of challenges. Now, healthcare, again, a small perspective on healthcare, everything revolves around the patient. I mean, automation in healthcare has been around for decades as well, like in the financial sector, to get bills paid. But from a clinical perspective, it's only been effectively used, in the last few years properly. Now, everything revolves around the patient. And essentially, the delivery of care happens through physicians and medical professionals, as well as, the use of hundreds of applications within the healthcare institution. Unlike in the banking sector or in the financial sector, you have a small set of applications. We literally have hundreds of applications used by different people within the organization. And every application has its security issues. So the second element of the puzzle is the interchange of information. Again, within a healthcare organization, you have many applications. You can have dozens of applications that need to interconnect, and there are challenges in doing that, internally and externally. The third part is obviously privacy and security that everybody needs to be concerned about, and more so in healthcare because of the sensitivity of the data. And the last part is the coding, making sure that the data is coded in ways that we can reuse them for clinical improvements and outcomes research. Now, again, like other industries, we do collect information. And in addition to the regular demographic information, social security, etc., healthcare actually collects some very sensitive information that you wouldn't want out there as a patient or as a consumer of a healthcare service, such as your prescriptions, your medical problems, your digital images, medical images, your psychiatry record, your lab, which has sensitive data in there. So it is more sensitive in that sense and needs to be protected in a particular way. We also collect, obviously, the regular financial information, which is credit card information, billing information, and so on. Additionally, in healthcare, we also use a lot of devices. So unlike other industries where you use the traditional types of end-user devices, we also use medical devices, which you'll see in a minute are a source of their own, threats. So we have, biomedical devices, medical, wearables, lab instruments, radiology equipment, all sorts of devices, implantables, okay, that the patient walks away with, that can be connected to the network. So the threats are very similar to other industries. On the slide, I just put one example because many came before in all the different presentations, but a lot of people don't know that 88% of ransomware of attacks last year were on healthcare institutions in the US. And 89% actually of those institutions that were surveyed actually lost data, patient data. And one statistic that is very alarming is that in the last 3 years, 140 million records were lost, were stolen by cyber criminals. And these are patient records, you know, with either institutions were held ransom to pay to unlock their records, or they were actually sold on the black market, or, you know. Now the other target is again those devices that I mentioned. In every healthcare institution moving forward, all of the devices that are used are going to be connected to the network. So on average, you have 10 to 15 devices per patient. So if you have, you know, you do the math, but you may have 3, 4, 5,000 devices that are connected to the network in addition to the PCs and the servers and the different technologies that are used. Now what's interesting about those is that a lot of them were never designed or built with security in mind initially. And so they have to be protected in different ways, and there are many technologies that can be used in order to protect them, and some of them were presented today by other panelists. Now, just one small example relating to that, which are 2 incidents that happened recently. One of them is related to infusion pumps. Okay, so patients in a hospital connect to infusion pumps. Hackers could actually connect to the network and deliver additional doses to the patients, putting them at risk. Another more interesting example is vulnerabilities were found in pacemakers. Pacemakers which patients have and are wearing and are implanted into them. And so vulnerabilities were found in them, but luckily they turned out to be software upgradable. So all the patients have to do is come back to the hospital and have them reprogrammed to make them safe. But these are the types of threats that we're seeing in healthcare. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that it's not all about technology. I mean, we need to address all the threats with the prevention, the detection, you know, using analytics, smart technologies to identify all of these threats. But we need to work on the processes and the sharing of knowledge across institutions and across sectors. So I've learned a lot from all of you today, you know, coming from you know, financial sector. But I'm sure if we can cross-collaborate or even create channels of communication to share experiences, healthcare can benefit a lot. Now, there are different frameworks out there, security frameworks out there already that were built thanks to the different industries that are already out there, and healthcare is already benefiting from those. And there are new guidelines that are being developed specifically for medical devices because they're a threat, and we're trying to adopt them to make sure we keep our patients safe. Thank you.
Wait for my presentation. I'm Jean-Michel Coqueveni from Biblos Bank. And the purpose of the presentation now is to highlight the importance of sharing information between security consultants or security professionals. So I will start my presentation with the latest threat that occurred in major threat in 2017. I will jump then to the battlefield or the battle between hackers and security professionals. And then I will list briefly the regulation, the standard, the baseline, the guideline we refer to, our practices, and I will end up with my recommendations. First of all, let me start with this slide I took from ISACA. They say hackers only need to get it right once. We need to get it right all the time, every time. So this is giving already an advantage for hackers. They have the motive, they have the incentive, they are fast, they catch opportunities, and this is putting more stress and raising the bar of requirement on security professionals. I will briefly, quickly list major event that happened in 2017. We have the Equifax data leak, We have nation-state cyber weapons that were leaked and used by cyber criminals like Eternal Blue. We witnessed the biggest ransomware infection to date, WannaCry. We see also macro-based downloader continuing to evolve and to be used by hackers. And cyber criminals tend now to exploit more and more vulnerabilities in websites and use them as a vector of infection for their visitors. We also saw new malware related to ATMs. Also, hackers are shifting more and more, focusing on the cryptocurrency industry because, first of all, it's a quick win for them, and then also it is for their anonymity also. And specialized threat analysis and protection market, like developing sandboxing tools to detect what antiviruses cannot detect, are being now challenged by hackers. I will give you a few examples of how hackers are performant. And I take a recent example I took from the Russian security intelligence company, Group IB, in which they mentioned that one vulnerability related to Microsoft Office was leaked. In fact, it was a proof of concept that was displayed on GitHub. And as soon as it was published, the Cobalt cybercrime group knew about it. They took it, developed it, and the same day, they created the malicious site and sent their emails to their victims, hoping to reach as much as possible victims. So you can see how they acted fast. They were extremely fast. And hackers also, they tend now to use innovative methods. They know that most of the companies and security industries develop controls. For instance, banks here, they have the standard policy framework. They have controls to minimize as much as possible and mitigate the risks of spoofing, email spoofing. So they are not using spoofing technique anymore. In fact, they are invading or hacking sites that are partner to known companies like Swift, Microsoft, IBM. They are hacking these domains and sending their malicious content and malware from these domains, which is tricking users more and more. This is an example on the opposite side of the security company, in which I show you how information flow circulates very, very slowly. This is a malware we submitted on VirusTotal. The slide is not very clear on this CD, so anyway. So the first day it was submitted, we knew that 4 antivirus companies were aware of it. We waited 2 days, and then we noticed that 14 out of 60 anti-vendor companies knew about it. So, as you see, some viruses and malware are still unknown, or the information flow between security vendors is not that optimal, as much as hackers are fast. Another example is a malware we submitted on VirusTotal, still today, till now, unknown. No one knows about it. But in fact, if we analyze this file, we know that it's malicious and it's a dropper of many other antivirus, many other viruses from the internet, and most of these viruses are little known by some very few antivirus companies. So you can see that we have a lot of threats on the internet. Security industry is slow, or the information, I would say, the information flow between security advisories or security providers is not optimal. Security follows standards. These are the main standards that most of the banks are familiar with, like ISO, PCI, NIST, the SANS 20 cybersecurity controls, in which if you apply the first 5, you can reduce the risk by 80%, and if you apply 20 controls, they mentioned that you can reduce your risk by 90%. And we have also SWIFT. After the Central Bank of Bangladesh issue, SWIFT started to communicate to their customers all indicator of compromise. They discover all new attacks, so they're sharing information with their customers. Also, we have, at the national level, regulations, and we have central bank We have the Banking Control Commission, Circular 222, So all these circulars are fine. And they help us, in fact, it is a reference for us. These are standards sometimes we are compelled to apply, or they could be guidelines that help us build our immunity or our defense systems. But are they enough? In fact, no, because hackers are fast, extremely fast, and becoming highly skilled. And intelligence reports say that the thin line between state-sponsored attack and financial attacks, financial hackers, is almost disappearing. So what can we do, or what are the efforts we still have to do in order to lessen or to reduce the gap? I will give you some recommendations. We say that unity makes strengths. So antivirus companies, you know that antivirus companies are not detecting optimally, or are not efficient in detecting malware. So they're trying to ally their forces. They created, for instance, the Cyber Threat Alliance that groups McAfee, Symantec, Palo Alto, Fortinet, and all these known antivirus companies. They are trying now to ally their forces to share information in order to optimally offer protection for their customers. The GCC experience, we have the ISAC, the Information Security Analysis Center, that's being developed in Dubai. We have SWIFT ISAC sharing information with their customers. So in Lebanon, we still don't have any reference like this. We don't have an Information Security Analysis Center or research, whatever you want to call it. We don't have a body to share this information. If we rely on antivirus companies, it's not enough. If we refer to standards, fine, they give us the protection we need, but there are still gaps. So what can we do? I suggest to have an information security analysis center in which banks can share information. If I'm hacked, or if I discover a malware, I can share it with my colleagues. If I know about malicious IPs, command and control centers trying to attack us every day, we see that every day. Why keeping this information in the corner? Why not sharing it with all the companies, with all the banks? We can help in preventing attacks. Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask Hiba very quickly, how much time do we have? We have 5 minutes, okay. So I'm going to start with one question and let's see how quickly we answer. So I'm fascinated by all the presentations, and I think, Joe, I'm going to start by you asking you this question because your presentation stood out because we all cover financial services and we've heard financial services throughout the day. Now, with all the new innovation, with the move in technology and this evolving cyber threat, I was a little bit scared hearing about all the medical wearables that we use, whether in hospital or outside. So just wanted your view, what's the impact on us going forward with these new technologies?
Well, the best way forward is actually to move back to paper. No, but wearables are here to stay and more of them are coming. I see the future very interesting. I mean, a few years ago, if you had asked me that question, I would have been extremely worried because there were no guidelines to make them more secure. Now there are a number of guidelines from the FDA and other organizations that are establishing standards for device manufacturers to create solutions that are more secure. And so in the future, I see that going even further. I see those devices becoming more intelligent to prevent threats themselves. So, you know, some of the intelligence or, you know, artificial intelligence that is being discussed out there could be built into some of these devices so that they can actually detect different patterns or behaviors and try to identify threats and notify, you know, a central entity of some of those threats. And they could actually be out there and help detect and prevent faster on larger scale. So I'm confident that if standards are used, if those guidelines are used by device manufacturers, and there's a discipline in the way they're actually introduced into the mainstream, whether healthcare or other industries, that we should be doing fine in a few years.
I tend to agree. I definitely think and consider technology becoming an enabler as well. It's not just a threat that we're exposed to, but I think that technology can bring that aspect of the next level is going to be more secure than the previous one. And I think we've seen it, you know, kind of with the evolution of the mobile phones that now allow for a biometric verification, and that becoming a step into banks using that as a matter of verification in order to access a bank account. So I think that technology can become an enabler, provided that, yes, there are those guidelines and standards that will govern the kind of the production of those. So I very much agree with that.
And I also like Jean-Michel's comment around, you know, criminals only have to get it right once, whereas professionals have to get it right every day, every time. So that's a good reminder. I guess you'd want me to wrap up with 2 minutes. So I think from the presentations we've heard so far today, previous panelists and the current panelists with a different view, what I'm hearing is the threat is changing, but everybody is still looking at the opportunity rather than the fear, which is a positive, great thing. There is lots of developments, whether that's through regulations, whether that's the need for information sharing. So we heard a lot today about the need for information sharing. So I guess that's something to take here in Lebanon and maybe learn from other countries how that works or industries. I've also heard around learning across industries as well. Awareness of consumers. I can't remember who said it, but consumers are most empowered. Yes. So again, touching on that and the engagement with consumers. And I think it goes back to certain basic risk management processes. So the world is evolving whether we like it or not. You know, technology is evolving very fast whether we like it or not. So it's moving with it. You all know how to manage risk, whether that's in government institutions, in the military, in banking, in healthcare. So I don't think there is anything new. Critical to this is understanding the critical assets that you actually rely on. We've also heard Joe mention, do you really need all the data that you hold? So organizations increasingly are relying on data. To some extent, thank God, the general data protection regulations coming through, because I think if nothing else, it just gives us that pause for thinking around the information and how we use it. We've also heard the ecosystem. We've heard it earlier on in the day. We've heard it from Magda as well, around it's an ecosystem of not just your organization, but all the different suppliers that you rely on. And again, I've seen it in my own work. You could have the best security in your organization, and you have some not third party, fourth party that you're not even aware of, that has some information that actually is a risk to you. I would like to end by thanking the panelists for their fantastic presentations and for the different perspectives we've had. Thank you.
Thank you.